Hello everyone and welcome to a very nice game from round 4 of the 2019 Sinquefield Cup. We didn't show any games from round 3, I decided to show game 11 of the Capablanca saga instead, as all of the games, like we mentioned, ended in a draw. But here's a very exciting game from round 4, Fabiano Caruana versus Levon Aronian, and it's gonna be a very exciting line of the Berlin defense. So without further ado, let's just check it out. We have e4 by Fabi, e5 by Levon, knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5. Sorry about that. Bishop to b5, the Rui Lopez is on the board. We have knight to f6, the Berlin defense, and now d3. With bishop to c5 and now c3, Caruana prepares d4. With castles by Levon, castles by Caruana, and now rook to e8. And here we have d4. Just pushing the bishop back with bishop to b6, and now there are a few games here that have reached this position. Rook to e1 is a known move here, bishop to g5 is a known move here, but as Fabi pretty much on every move chose a very rare continuation, now with the d5, already on move 8 we enter a never before seen position of the Berlin defense. So we have a completely new game. You can't go to a5, well, due to b4, just losing a knight, so you have to go to e7 with knight to e7, but I don't think this really came as a surprise to Levon, as you kind of don't go into this if you don't know what you're doing. So Fabi grabs the pawn, we have knight captures on e5, Levon captures the e4 pawn, and now queen to f3, attacking the knight on e4. Levon brings it back with knight to f6 and now d6 by Caruana. Very exciting. So what can black play here? Levon decides to capture the pawn with pawn captures on d6 and now knight to c4, attacking the bishop and also preparing to recapture on d6. And here, while Levon could decide to just continue developing it, bring the knight over to c6 or to g6, he instead decides to, for the moment at least, hold on to his extra pawn. So d5, attacking the knight on c4, and now knight to d6. And this knight is now, well, officially a monster knight, until black figures out a way how to kick it away from there. You're attacking the rook, you have to move the rook. Also, if this knight moves, the f7 pawn is quite vulnerable. So rook f8, taking care of both threats. And here, bishop to g5, already threatening to create some weaknesses on the king's side. Levon decides that it's time to give back the pawn and just get rid of all of this tension. We have knight to e4, now giving back the pawn. With knight captures, pawn captures, queen captures, and now you could play rook to e8 to defend your knight, but with rook to e8 the queen just moves and the knight still remains pinned, so just f6, getting rid of the pesky bishop, with bishop back to e3 and now d5, finally freeing that isolated d pawn. Queen back to f3 and now knight to g6. Now by playing f6, Levon also created a very nice outpost for his knight on e5. With knight to a3, Fabi now perhaps can play knight c2 to d4, maybe block the isolated pawn and then attack it later. With bishop to c7, transferring the bishop on this nicer diagonal, and now rook 8 to d1, piling up on the isolated d pawn. With knight to e5, attacking the queen, you can't really stay on the king side as black's bishops are just too powerful, so we have queen to e2 and now a6, pushing the bishop back. Bishop to a4 and now bishop to g4, attacking the queen and the rook, so you have to play f3 here with f3, and now bishop back to e6, finally defending the d5 pawn. With bishop to b3, now with a double attack against the pawn here, and now rook to e8. And here f4, a very nice idea. For example, if black decides to go knight to g4, then you just move the bishop, and black has no useful discoveries, well, to make use of this, both rook and the queen being on the e file. So after f4 we have knight to c6, bringing the knight back, and now comes queen to f3, getting out of the e file. Now with a triple attack, well, not that, but with a triple attack against the d5 pawn. And it's not not good to defend it. For example, if knight e7, just c4. So here bishop back to b6, putting pressure on the e3 pawn. Also, if the light square bishop moves, the rook will also be attacking it. Knight to c2, adding another defender to the bishop, and now comes knight to a5. And here Fabi has to decide whether he grabs the pawn or he goes for bishop captures on b6. If he goes into this line where he trades everything, followed by queen f2, captures, and now knight to c4, he will have to give up his light square bishop and thus fix black's pawn structure, and he will not be grabbing any pawns. So for example, bishop captures, pawn captures, and black's pawn structure is now fixed. On the other hand, if you play bishop captures on d5, which is what Fabi played, you just win a pawn. So we have bishop captures on d5, bishop captures, rook captures on d5, and now bishop captures on e3 with check. Knight captures on e3, and now queen to b6, just pinning the attacked piece, the knight on e3. Rook to d3 defending, and now knight to c4 with a nice triple attack against the knight here. And now, if you play rook e1, then you allow black to go in for all the trades. Knight captures, rook captures, and then you could either trade or go rook e8. Fabi decides for a different line. After this knight to c4 move, he doesn't defend the knight, rather queen to d5 check will pick up the knight. Levon didn't blunder a piece. Of course, he will win back the e3 knight. So king to f8, you don't want to go to h8, as you will have to deal with a lot of back rank weaknesses. So king to f8, and now queen captures on c4. Levon wins back the knight immediately. Rook captures on e3, rook captures, and queen captures with check. King h1, and now rook to d8. So here we have a queen and rook endgame where Caruana is up a pawn. He has an extra c pawn. Where black doesn't have any c-pawns. With h3, Fabi creates some breathing room for the king, and now b5, pushing the queen back, with queen to c6, going after the a6 pawn, and now queen to e2, going after the rook and also the b2 pawn. Rook f3, with ideas of going maybe queen c7 followed by rook g3 to threaten the g7 pawn. But first, Levon says it's time to win back some material, with queen captures on b2, queen captures on a6, Caruana also wins the a-pawn, now he's again up a pawn, and now h5, preparing h4 to prevent a rook to g3. We have king to h2, Fabi also doesn't want his king on the back rank to constantly have to keep checking for any checks, and now h4, just preventing that rook to g3 idea. We have queen to a7, and now comes king to g8, tucking the king into a safer square. Queen to e7, attacking the rook, and now of course queen to d2, just defending the rook. With rook to e3, Levon now controls the d file, Fabi controls the e file, and we have queen to d6, offering a trade of queens. And if you play captures, then black can hold this position to a draw, even being down a pawn. So after queen d6, we have queen to e4. Queen back to d5. Again, Levon wants to go into a king and rook endgame. Queen to b4. We have rook to c8, now trying to pile up on the backward c pawn. And here Fabi played a4. And I don't know if it's this position exactly, but it's one of the positions around here, maybe a few moves back, that Levon was solo on the clock, that he pressed the clock while he had 1 second on the clock. And then, okay, he was rewarded increment, but he almost lost on time. So not sure if this is the exact position, but somewhere around here. And here after a4, Levon played queen to c5, with ideas of trading queens. As the queen is under attack, also the rook is under attack, so you cannot push something like a5 here as you lose the rook, but this doesn't work here. So feel free to pause the video here and figure out why this doesn't work and find the winning idea for Caruana in this position. Well, I give you a couple of seconds. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, you are an excellent finder of winning moves. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, rook to e8 check. It's pretty remarkable for Levon to miss a move like this, but like I said, he was very, very low on time, and probably even in this position he had maybe only a few seconds on the clock, and it's easy to miss an idea like this. So obviously you cannot capture the rook. If you capture, you lose the queen. That's just lost. So after rook e8 check, Levin played king to h7, but now comes, of course, rook captures on c8. You have to recapture the rook. Queen captures, and now a captures on b5. And now, all of a sudden, where Levin's b pawn was controlling Fabi's a pawn and c pawn, now Fabi has two connected pass pawns on the queen side, and whereas Levin has no connected pass pawns on the queen side, and this is just unplayable. Levin, of course, tried to create some chances with queen f5, b6. Fabi just continues pushing his pass pawn, queen to d3. Hoping for b7. If b7, then queen g3 allows Levin to draw by repetition like this, just queen g3, queen e1. But of course, Fabi played c4, a crucial move. Now the queen guards the d1 square, so no queen g3 to e1 action is possible. With queen to g3 check, king h1, and now queen to d3. I don't think queen to d3 actually comes with any sort of a threat, maybe hoping for queen f1 check followed by queen captures on f4, but Fabi says no, it's not a problem. He just pushes c5, and it was in this position that Levin Aronian resigned the game, as after queen f1 check, the queen now also guards the f4 pawn, so even that is without a question. So yeah, really exciting game, especially as it comes from the Berlin. But so many interesting games arrived from the Berlin recently that a few years ago everyone thought that if it's a Berlin, it's going to be super boring. But since everyone saw how Alpha Zero treats the Berlin, and even before that, it became quite an exotic opening. Kramnik versus Aronian, for example, in Aronian versus Kramnik, for example, in the candidates, where Kramnik just unleashed the Berlin Fury, was really awesome. But yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Peter Burdes for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Sinquefield Cup, continuing the Capablanca saga, and of course checking up on your suggestions. And I didn't show the standings, as so far only Anand and Fabi won one game. All of the other games were drawn in all 4 rounds, so it's a bit of a slow event, but maybe things will brighten up. So, thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.